Today on Nursing Matters, the mid-career reset, reinventing yourself without starting over. I'm Christina, and this is your daily dose. Let's get into it. I want to talk directly to the nurse who feels restless right now. Not lazy, not ungrateful, not burned out beyond repair, just aware. Aware that the version of your career that worked 5 years ago may not fit the person you've become. And that realization can feel terrifying when you've spent years building stability, credibility, and identity around your role. Because nursing has a way of convincing people that if you leave one lane, you're throwing everything away. But what if that isn't true? What if mid-career isn't the collapse of your professional identity, but the moment you finally understand how valuable your experience really is? Because some of the most powerful moves in healthcare happen after nurses stop trying to prove themselves and start trying to align themselves. Today, we're talking about the mid-career reset and why reinventing yourself does not mean starting over. A survey from Incredible Health found that 45% of nurses between the ages of 35 and 50 are actively considering a career change. Whether that means changing specialties, changing care settings, or leaving bedside roles altogether. And honestly, I think that number is probably low because I talk to nurses every single day who are quietly asking themselves questions like, can I do this for another 10 years? Is there something else I'm supposed to be doing? Why am I successful on paper but unhappy in real life? Did I build a career or did I build a trap? And I think healthcare has conditioned nurses to see career changes as failure instead of evolution. We celebrate loyalty in nursing almost to a fault. People wear suffering like a badge of honor. 20 years in the same role, chronic stress, no work-life balance, emotionally exhausted, physically depleted, and everyone says, wow, what dedication. But nobody asks if that nurse is actually fulfilled. Mid-career is not a crisis, it's clarification. You finally know enough about yourself to stop chasing what sounds impressive and start pursuing what actually fits your life. That's wisdom, not failure. And the nurses who recognize that early, they usually make the smartest moves of their careers. Now, I want to speak personally for a moment. I earned my master's in leadership and organizational development in my 50s. Not in my 20s, not right out of school, not on some perfectly linear timeline. My career trajectory has been more like a game of chutes and ladders. And throughout my career, I changed directions multiple times. Recruitment, leadership, operations, healthcare onboarding, building communities, content creation, marketing, entrepreneurship. But every time I pivoted, there was always somebody, usually someone who had never taken a risk themselves, implying I was starting over. But I wasn't starting over. I was reallocating experience, and there's a difference. You see, nurses underestimate how much transferable value they actually have. Let's talk about what you've already built. If you've worked bedside nursing for 10 years, you know crisis management, prioritization, communication under pressure, documentation, conflict resolution, interdisciplinary collaboration, emotional intelligence, patient advocacy, systems thinking, leadership without authority. Do you understand how valuable that is outside of bedside nursing? Wow, it's a lot. Healthcare companies spend millions trying to teach people those skills. Nurses live them every shift. The problem is that nurses often define themselves too narrowly. You're not just an ICU nurse. You're a high-level decision maker operating in a complex environment with incomplete information and competing priorities. That skill set translates. And I think mid-career, nurses sometimes get trapped by sunk cost thinking. I already invested 15 years into this. I can't leave now. I'm too old to pivot. I don't want to start at the bottom again. So let me just say right now, first of all, you are not too old. Second, you are not at the bottom. You may be new to a role, but you are not new to professionalism, healthcare, leadership, communication, or resilience. Those things matter. And honestly, I think some of the best hires in healthcare are experienced nurses making intentional pivots because they understand people. And healthcare desperately needs people who understand people. We also need to stop pretending the only successful nursing career is bedside until retirement. That's completely outdated thinking. Some nurses are meant to teach, some meant to lead. Some are meant to build businesses. Some are meant to move into informatics, case management, recruiting, compliance, education, quality, utilization review, clinical technology, operations, or advocacy. And none of those paths make you less a nurse. Your license is not your cage. It's your foundation. And I want to say something else that may hit hard for some people. Sometimes the version of you that built your current career is not the same version of you that's supposed to sustain the next chapter. You evolve. Your priorities evolve. What mattered at 28 may not matter at all at 45. At some point, many nurses stop chasing titles and start chasing peace, flexibility, purpose, autonomy, mental health, family time, creative freedom, financial independence. And that shift, that's one of the most healthy things you can do. I think one of the biggest mistakes people make mid-career is assuming they need to blow up their entire life to create change. You usually don't. Most reinventions happen gradually. One certification, one side project, one LinkedIn post, one class, one conversation, one mentor, one application. That's how pivots begin. Quietly, not dramatically. I also want to talk about identity for a second, because this part can get emotional. A lot of nurses tie their worth to being needed. And when you've spent years being the dependable one, the experienced one, the one who always handles everything, stepping into something unfamiliar can make you feel exposed. You go from expert to learner again, and that can bruise your ego. But growth requires humility, and honestly, being willing to reinvent yourself mid-career is one of the bravest things you can do, because it requires honesty. It requires admitting this version of my life no longer fits me or who I want to be. That's a hard thing to do, especially when other people are comfortable with the version of you that's exhausted. Sometimes the people around you resist your growth because your change forces them to confront their own stagnation. Don't let that stop you. You're allowed to evolve and elevate. You're allowed to outgrow environments. You are allowed to pursue a healthier version of success. So here's what I want you to do today. Take out your phone, open your notes app, and write down 3 things about your current role that still energize you. Not what you tolerate and not what pays the bills, because those things don't ultimately matter for this exercise. I want to know what genuinely energizes you. Then write down 3 things that consistently drain you. Not things you're bad at, things that drain the life out of you. And we all know what I'm talking about. That distinction matters because sometimes we're actually very good at things that are destroying us. That list becomes your compass. If you love mentoring but hate chaos, maybe leadership or education fits. If you love patient interaction but hate hospital politics, maybe outpatient care fits. If you love healthcare but hate direct care, maybe operations, recruiting, compliance, or informatics fits. Patterns tell stories. Pay attention to them because they matter. And don't ignore the quiet voice telling you something needs to change. Most people don't regret the pivots they made. They regret the ones they waited too long to make. That's your daily dose. If you're in a season of transition right now, I want you to remember this. Reinvention is never failure. Growth is not betrayal. And experience never goes to waste. Share this episode with a nurse standing at a crossroads. I'm Christina. Keep showing up because nursing matters. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Nursing Matters Daily Dose. Are you interested in more career resources? Then hop on over to the RN Network at rnnet.org. Also, while you're at it, hit that like and subscribe button and share this episode with one nurse who really needs to hear it. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.